in the tanks that is clean. And so in the long term, again, the long term, one of the major long-term issues is having a billing system in place such that every single resident and every single business that receives water also receives a bill. And then also ensuring that if you receive water and you receive a bill, that you actually have to pay that bill. And if you don't pay that bill, there has to be consequences. I think that's certainly a long-term issue that has to be dealt with. But in the short term, our entire focus is on making sure that we get an adequate amount of water being pumped out of both Fuel and OB Curtis so as to ultimately get back to a situation where the water that we're sending, that when you turn on your faucet, that you're actually getting clean water through it. And that's really what we're focused on. Yes.
So if the tanks are filling up with water that's not clean, how long after the plant is producing clean water will the tanks be full of clean water?
I'm gonna let Jim answer that question. But just as a reminder, we have been very transparent that the water is not does not need to be is not drinkable at this time. Please boil your water. Let me say that again. The water is not drinkable at this time. Please boil your water. But it is incredibly important that while that is certainly a challenge that the city has been facing now for 33 or 34 days, one of the risks that we're trying to avoid is having no water in the tanks, having no water such that no one in the city has the ability to flush their toilets, et cetera. Now, there have certainly been water pressure issues over the last couple of days in certain areas of the city and primarily for those homes and businesses that are a long way from where the actual tanks are. But by and large, over the last 3 or 4 days, we've been able to avoid the massive lack of any water in the system, and hopefully we can avoid that in the future. But in terms of timing, I'm going to let Jim speak to that.
Yeah, Governor, thank you. It's very hard to predict exactly how long it will take. It depends a good bit on pressures that are in the system and how much is in those overhead storage that have to move through the system. As you remember, right before the state came and activated to come into the plant, we did have quite a bit of water that was already in that system that was still processing through the system. As we increase those pressures, I think we'll see, as we increase pressure, as well as today, I guess it's another win I should mention, we were able to get the chlorine levels up at the plant today, which was a real plus for us as well, which will help as we move more chlorinated water through the system so that we can get those bacteria and things that need to be addressed in the system. Know that the UV system, the ultraviolet system that's part of the plant at OB Curtis is functioning as designed, so it does a great job of making sure those bacteria are zapped before they get into the pipe. But we still do have quite a bit of that is in the system right now. Timelines, I hope to be able to update you soon with a better timeline. But with as many issues as we have in the plant, really a lot of my focus is right now is to get those pressures and get that margin, if you will, water overhead, so that we can continue to conduct all of the different maintenance activities that have to occur to fix different parts of the plant. So I described to the team a lot of times it's like fixing the airplane while you're still flying. You have to be very careful how you fix it so that you stay flying. Same thing as we're trying to produce water. All that water demand needs to continue to occur, and every time we have to do some maintenance, then we have to offset some of that with, we have to take something down, which is not going to be making water while we're doing that. So again, as more we can increase that, I think the better we'll be. Also, just go ahead and know we will have some good days at these plants, and we will continue still to have some bad days. There is a lot of things that have to still be fixed.
I just want to follow that up with, as Jim said, it's very difficult to give you a specific timeline, but here's what I can assure you of. The State Department of Health has a process wherein they test the water. As you heard me say on Monday and again on Tuesday, it is in essence for the State Department of Health to say that there is clean water in the system. They have to have 2 consecutive days of taking 120 samples at different locations in which 100% of those 120 samples are clean. I can commit to you today that we will continue to advise Jacksonians to boil their water until we actually get to the point where we have 2 consecutive days where there are 120 samples that come back clean. Until that point, we are going to be transparent, we're going to be honest, and we're going to tell the people here in the city to boil their water. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have a follow-up to the fixes at the plant. We'd learned earlier in the week that there were some pumps that were broken, and then we had this rental pump that was brought in. Can you explain the job of those pumps and where we stand with the broken ones, the rental pump, where that all stands now?
Certainly. No, thank you. So the raw water pumps, the pumps that bring the raw water from the Barnett Reservoir into the plant to be treated and processed, we have 2 of those pumps that needed to be repaired. One had a catastrophic failure where the actual shaft in the pump has been broken. Unfortunately, these are very old pumps. There's no off-the-shelf. Models to put something new in place. In fact, the diameters that were used back in the 60s for those shafts are not what is used currently. So they're having to actually be machined out of raw material and turned in. So we expect to have those pumps back on site. The current estimate is September the 9th. We're hopeful that will work out the way that it needs to. In the interim, we did get a temporary pump that has been put in place so that we can generate about another 4 million gallons a day through that raw water intake pump, and it is in place and operating as designed.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain further about the chemical fluctuations that you mentioned earlier?
Chemical fluctuation.
So I take it you're talking about the issue today?
Yeah, the chemical fluctuations that keep occurring and you have to stop operations.
Yeah, so as you know, there is a structure that's out in the reservoir that detects what the pH level and the turbidity levels are of the water in the reservoir and sends information to the operators to say the water's coming out of the reservoir with this pH and this turbidity. That particular structure is currently not operating. So these well-trained, dedicated operators that we have in plant really don't get that advance notice of what's coming in. They have to react to what's also been complicated by the floodwaters and all the additional rainwater that changes the pH by having those additional waters in play. And I think just being able to properly assess that pH and get the chemicals, the disinfection chemicals, to react is taking longer today than what it has been in the last few days.